Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. Today marks President Lee Jae Myung's 30th day in office, and he didn't let it pass quietly. Breaking from the recent practice of waiting 100 days, he held a live town hall-style press conference, signaling a shift towards direct, high-speed governance. He underscored Korea's military strength while laying out a North Korea strategy rooted in deterrence, diplomacy, and practical cooperation. In the past 4 weeks, Lee also met global leaders, de-escalated tensions on the peninsula, and tapped his first foreign policy team anchored by career diplomats. In our third installment, marking 1 month of the Lee Jae Myung presidency, we focus on his emerging foreign policy, where he's positioning Korea on the global stage, and how alliances and diplomacy may evolve. To help us break things down, we're joined by Dr. Young-sik Bong, visiting professor at Yonsei University. Welcome to the program.
Glad to be here.
And also joining us from Washington is Andrew Yeo, Senior Fellow and SK Korea Foundation Chair at Brookings Institution's Center for East Asia Policy Studies. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me here as well.
So, let's begin our discussion with Dr. Bong first. So, today, President Lee held his first press conference just 30 days in, a town hall format like I've mentioned. This was much more earlier than, the previous presidents. What do you make of the timing and the style of this latest press conference?
Yeah, Mok-yeon, you're correct that having the press conference with the nation on the 30th day after the inauguration is the earliest press conference for any president. Previously, presidents of South Korea usually held the first press conference on the 100th day after the inauguration. So it shows his desire to be connected with the rest of the Korean society in the aftermath of a very turbulent political events, including the impeachment of the former president Yoon Suk-yeol, and the fact that his government had to start without the interim government to prepare for the governance. According to the statistics by the Korean media company YTN, former President Lee Myung-bak held a press conference with the nation 7 times, President Moon Jae-in 11 times, and President Park Geun-hye only 3 times. And the President Yoon Suk-yeol also held a press conference like this one only for 3 times. So I think President Lee Jae Myung realized that it is very important for his government to stay connected in good communication with the rest of the Korean society to have good governance.
So it really shows President Lee's willingness to engage with the public. Now, on that note, there were several questions on diplomacy and national security, which is our topic for tonight. Dr. Yeo, what stood out for you the most from those exchanges?
Well, we've been hearing many times that Lee Jae Myung wants to promote a pragmatic foreign policy, a pragmatic diplomacy, and we really saw that on display. And I think there were 2 examples from his town hall meeting. The first is with North Korea. Normally, you would expect a progressive leader to move more rapidly or develop an ambitious plan for inter-Korea engagement. But we saw that President Lee was moving more cautiously, and he was saying that we should recognize the importance of coordinating with Washington and also with Japan as well. And he said that inter-Korea relations is going to be difficult, that it's going to take time, it's not going to be easy. And that's, again, maybe reflecting this pragmatism that he has. And then even in issues like the US-Korea relationship with the ongoing trade negotiations, he mentioned how South Korea is doing its best, that we're negotiating very hard, but also he gave the sign that it's going to be a difficult process, even though the deadline's looming. So what we see again from his town hall is a reflection of this turn to pragmatic diplomacy.
So that once again highlighted President Lee's pragmatic diplomacy policies. Now let's fast forward to the first week of President Lee's presidency. He already spoke with President Trump, President Japanese Prime Minister, and also the Chinese President, all within the first week of his presidency. Do you think these early contacts could shape Korea's diplomatic posture, Dr. Bong?
Yes, but at the same time, the government has been inaugurated only for 100 days, so a lot of things have to be waited for producing actual result. For one thing, there has not been any official meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and South Korean President Lee Jae Myung because President Trump cut short of his schedule at the G7 meeting to deal with the urgent situation in Iran. So President Lee Jae Myung is still waiting for the summit meeting with the U.S. President Donald Trump. And as Professor Yeo clearly mentioned, that the ongoing negotiations on the front of the tariffs and trade between the two countries would be serious challenges to Lee Jae Myung government in his approach to the U.S.-Korea security and economic partnership. But one bright side is restoration of high-rank official contacts and meetings between South Korea and Japan. And in this press conference, President Lee Jae Myung made it really clear that in fulfillment of his diplomacy based upon pragmatism, there are a lot of areas for mutual cooperation between South Korea and Japan. So he expressed his commitment to conducting two-track diplomacy between South Korea and Japan. And he did not rule out inheriting the 1998 Kim Dae-jung Obuchi Declaration, one of the major hallmarks of the good days between the two countries in the neighborhood. So we are going to see a lot of progresses taking place, at least in the context of the bilateral partnership between South Korea and Japan.
So a lot to look forward between the two countries moving forward. Now, staying with Seoul's ties with Japan, just 2 weeks in, President Lee was at the G7 meeting, meeting leaders, including the Japanese Prime Minister as well. Dr. Yeo, what does this tell about the reset in South Korea-Japan ties and also to the return to shuttle diplomacy?
Well, just like Professor Bong had mentioned, these early bilateral meetings are extremely important. And the G7 meeting a couple of weeks ago is a meeting where many expected that President Lee would meet Donald Trump, but of course Donald Trump left early. So the most consequential, important meeting out of that G7 summit was the bilateral Korea-Japan, a meeting between Ishiba and President Lee. And I would say it's less of a reset and more of a continuation of the positive momentum that we experienced in South Korea-Japan relations under the previous government. I think what may be more surprising is that some were skeptical whether President Lee would maintain strong ties to Japan. But so far, I think he's proven his critics wrong by saying that the Korea-Japan relationship, these are two countries that are inseparable. I mean, it would have been politically expedient for him to criticize the previous conservative government, the Yoon government's pro-Japan orientation, but instead he's taken a strategic perspective and saying that South Korea should align with Japan. And so we will see shuttle diplomacy, I think, sustained under President Lee's leadership. At the same time, as he mentioned in the town hall meeting, even though they want to make the relationship more forward-looking, there's still some unresolved issues that relate to historical Japan's past colonial legacy in South Korea. And so those are things that may come up. But for now, I do think that the relationship between Korea and Japan is moving forward under President Lee.
Right. So maintaining the previous government's ties with Japan, it took a lot of us by surprise. So we'll have to see how that unfolds. Now, let's also touch upon the U.S. front. President Lee admitted today that the ongoing tariff negotiations with Washington are not quite easy, and it might not be able to be wrapped up by August. Dr. Bong, how should we interpret this tone of President Lee, and how should President Lee's government approach this diplomatically?
President Lee, in response to the question asked by the reporter of AFP, said that he knew this question would be coming and right. He gave a serious thought on how he would answer the question. And he said, frankly speaking, he could not give any specific explanations about the current state of very difficult and challenging negotiations taking place between Washington and Seoul about the tariff and trade between the countries. So what is most urgent for South Korea is to persuade the Trump administration about the possible new pause on the 90-day pause on tariff, reciprocal tariff on South Korea, in the aftermath of the conclusion of the negotiation between the United States and Vietnam. If that happens, that would be regarded as a small success for the Lee government of South Korea. But it is still very uncertain whether that is actually going to happen, considering the hardline posture of the Trump administration toward the trading partners of the United States, not just South Korea, but countries like Japan. After 9 rounds of official negotiations, Japan, United States are not really close to finalize the negotiations prior to another summit meeting between Prime Minister Lee Jae Myung and President Donald Trump. So it is very urgent for South Korean government to have something really concrete before finalizing the schedule of the summit meeting, bilateral summit meeting between the two leaders of South Korea and the United States. So it doesn't really bode well that Secretary of State Marco Rubio suddenly canceled his scheduled visit to South Korea, which would have been a great opportunity for both sides to tighten some loose ends before the matters will be finalized by the top leaders of the countries.
So definitely it's a very tough issue, and President Lee also sounded very careful and cautious today. Let's also move on to the China front right now. Beijing has invited President Lee to the Victory Day parade this fall. Dr. Yeo, how should Korea weigh in that invitation given the current U.S.-China tensions?
Yeah, we were just talking about relations with Washington, but now Beijing puts out this invitation, which puts President Lee in a bind in some ways. It's his first geopolitical test. It's going to be a difficult decision. On one hand, we remember Park Geun-hye's visit during the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II, when she traveled to Beijing, and there were photos of her sitting near Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. And there was some controversy of her trip. I think it'd be even more controversial at this point in time, given the China, Russia, North Korea, Iran relationship that's developed, and to have Lee Jae Myung sitting near Putin if he attends, and Xi Jinping would send the wrong message, not just to the United States, but also to European partners. So my sense is that the risks are higher, and it may be preferable to maybe send someone else to represent South Korea, perhaps the prime minister or foreign minister in his place. So there's certainly opportunities for Lee Jae Myung to improve relations with Beijing, but there are probably other ways to do it rather than him directly attending an anniversary where he has to sit through a Chinese military parade.
Right, that definitely isn't really an easy stage to stand on. Now, on inter-Korean relations, Dr. Bong, President Lee has emphasized today that dialogue itself should never be off the table, calling a total shutdown of dialogue foolish. He also cited North Korea's quick response to South Korea's, halting loudspeaker broadcasts and leaflets as beyond expectations. What do you make of this trust-building start, and how long do you think it could last?
It's a good example of his pragmatic foreign policy, especially toward North Korea. He started with a small thing, termination of the operation of loudspeakers toward North Korea, which was quickly responded by North Korea. President himself admitted that he was positively surprised how quick North Korea responded to this. So his litmus test to gauge the intention of North Korea so far has been successful. So I believe that he's going to build upon a series of small successes to generally improve the inter-Korean relations, which has been quite tense during the previous government of Yoon Suk-yeol. But at the same time, he did not forget to mention that the best strategic asset for South Korea in dealing with North Korea to earn peaceful coexistence is military strength and the solid foundation of security cooperation based upon U.S.-Korea security alliance. And he did not rule out that he would continue to develop the trilateral security cooperation among U.S., Japan, and South Korea dealing with nuclear and missile threats from North Korea. So it'll be a combination of strength and the engagement toward North Korea. And my thoughts on the invitation by the Chinese government for President Lee Jae Myung to attend the military parade. The last example that Professor Yeon mentioned, that President Park Geun-hye went to Beijing, did not really produce the desired effect for South Korea, right? Chinese government retaliated South Korea by banning group tours when South Korea agreed to allow the deployment of the missile defense system, that system for U.S. forces in South Korea. So that negative precedence would affect the strategic thinking of the Lee Jae Myung government against him going to Beijing. If Beijing is not going to actually show Lee Jae Myung government of South Korea concrete and undeniable benefits.
So a very cautious approach is definitely crucial at this point. Now, let's also touch upon President Lee's latest appointments. He placed diplomats like Wi Sung-rak and Cho Hyun in top security roles. Dr. Yeon, what does that signal about his foreign policy approach?
Yeah, it's a great question. We see that President Lee selected seasoned veterans with ample foreign policy experience. Both Wi Sung-rak and also Foreign Minister Cho Hyun are veteran diplomats that served in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for decades. Wi Sung-rak has a long career in foreign service. He was a six-party top negotiator. He was the former ambassador to Russia, Director General for North American Affairs. And Cho Hyun served as first and second vice foreign minister under Moon Jae-in. He was also South Korea's ambassador to the United Nations under the Moon government, and he helped negotiate FTAs with Japan and Mexico. So these are two individuals that have, decades of experience, and that should reassure the foreign policy community that South Korea will continue to stay engaged in global affairs. Wi Sung-rak's appointment in particular suggests that President Lee wants to sustain strong bilateral relations with the United States. And even before Lee Jae Myung was elected, Wi Sung-rak was coming to Washington quite often just try to change the narrative of how Washington views progressive governments and in Lee Jae Myung. And so far we've seen that we've heard President Lee say several times that he wants to have a solid relationship with the United States. And so once again, I think these appointments reflect Lee's desire to have someone with a lot of experience filling in foreign policy and security roles, in part because he himself doesn't have any direct experience. So he'll be relying on these two individuals to help him make sound decisions moving forward.
Now, staying with the latest appointment by President Lee, it was for the first time in 64 years that a civilian, An Gyu-baek, has been tapped as a defense minister. Dr. Bong, what's the significance of this latest appointment?
Well, first of the candidate for the Minister of National Defense is not without any deep and professional experience and knowledge of national security. As a longtime member of National Assembly and in the Committee of National Security and Military, he has piled up a great deal of experience and expertise on national defense. So his appointment reflects the appointment of the person who knows essential things, how to run the armed forces of South Korea. Having said that, his appointment, I believe, is considered for the purposes of shoring up the confidence and honor and the dignity of the armed forces, which have been quite strained after the declaration of martial law for the first time in 46 years in South Korea in last December. So fusing military mindset and the civilian mindset for the renewal of the armed forces must be one of the top priorities for the Lee Jae Myung government to catch two birds with a stone, so to speak. So reformulation of the armed forces of South Korea to keep pace with fast-pacing changes in global security environment must be the background reason for his appointment.
So it's not really just symbolic, it's a structural move, and we'll see how it unfolds. Now, I'm afraid we'll have to end our discussion at this point, but thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Dr. Bong. And Dr. Yeo, we appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having me here.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.